You know that thing where you're at Costco, you're supposed to grab paper towels and get out, but somehow you end up in the outdoor furniture section explaining to your wife why you need a 17-foot inflatable hot tub. That's basically what happened with Trump's economic speech this week, except instead of a hot tub, it was his wife's underwear drawer. I'm serious, this actually happened. The former president went to Rocky Mount, North Carolina. Nice town, good people, probably dealing with the same inflation and rent issues as everyone else. And he was supposed to give a speech about affordability. Affordability. That was the theme. How to make life cheaper for working families. Gas prices, grocery bills, maybe throw in something about housing costs or prescription drugs. You know, the stuff that keeps people up at night when they're looking at their bank account at 2 in the morning, wondering how they're going to make it to the next paycheck. 90 minutes. That's how long this speech went. 90 minutes. For context, that's longer than most Marvel movies, and those have explosions and a raccoon with a machine gun. This was one guy at a podium in North Carolina, ostensibly talking about making eggs cheaper. And somewhere in the middle of those 90 minutes, Trump decided the audience really needed to hear about how the FBI went through Melania's underwear drawer during the Mar-a-Lago raid, and how everything in that drawer was, and I'm quoting here, perfectly folded. Perfectly folded. He said that out loud into a microphone at an economics rally. Now, look, I need to back up for a second because some of you might be thinking, wait, what does the Mar-a-Lago raid have to do with grocery prices? And the answer is nothing, absolutely nothing. But that didn't stop Trump from spending a significant chunk of this affordability speech relitigating the August 2022 FBI search of his Florida resort. You remember that, right? The one where federal agents executed a search warrant looking for classified documents, the one that happened over 2 years ago? Yeah, that one. Trump's still on it. He called it illegal and disgusting, which is how he describes most things that involve accountability, and then he really got into the details. And when I say details, I mean details nobody asked for. He talked about FBI agents going through multiple drawers. He talked about them going into his son's room. And then he started describing Melania's organizational system. He said she's very meticulous. He emphasized the folding, the perfect folding, like he was giving a TED Talk on closet organization, like Martha Stewart was in the audience taking notes. I'm trying to imagine being an FBI agent in that moment. You've trained at Quantico, you've studied criminal procedure, you've executed dozens of search warrants, you're a professional, and now 2 years later, the former president is at a rally in North Carolina telling 1,000 people that you didn't appreciate his wife's underwear folding technique. That's got to be a weird day at the office. Your partner's probably texting you like, hey, did you see he's talking about us again? And you're like, well, yeah, I saw. He said I messed up the folding. Did you mess up the folding? I don't know, man. I was looking for classified documents. I wasn't auditioning for Marie Kondo. But here's what gets me. This wasn't some off-the-cuff comment at a press gaggle. This wasn't a quick aside during a Q&A. This was a prepared speech. Well, prepared might be generous, but it was a scheduled event with a stated purpose. Talk about affordability. Talk about how you're going to make life easier for people who are struggling. And instead, we got a deep dive into closet organization and federal law enforcement's alleged disrespect for luxury lingerie storage systems. I mean, imagine you're a voter. You live in Rocky Mount. You took time off work. Maybe you got someone to watch the kids. You drove to this rally because you're genuinely worried about money. Rent went up again. Your car needs new tires, but you can't afford them. You're buying the store brand cereal now because the name brand stuff is $7 a box, which is insane. Cereal shouldn't cost more than a movie ticket, but here we are, and you're thinking, okay, maybe I'll hear something useful, maybe there's a plan, maybe someone's going to talk about wages or taxes or something that actually affects my life. And then you get 90 minutes, a solid chunk of which is about how FBI agents didn't respect the sanctity of a former First Lady's undergarment drawer. You came for paper towels. You got a seminar on folding techniques. Okay, so here's the part that's nuts. This moment, the underwear drawer thing, spread online immediately, like instantly, because of course it did. It's 2025. Everything spreads instantly. You can't say perfectly folded at a political rally without it becoming a meme before you finish the sentence. And according to reports, Trump's advisors were concerned. Concerned. That's the word that keeps showing up in the coverage. His team was reportedly concerned that he went off message during an economic address. You think? Concerned is doing a lot of work in that sentence. That's like saying the captain of the Titanic was concerned about the iceberg. That's like saying your teenager is concerned after they back your car into a mailbox. Concerned is what you are when your flight gets delayed 20 minutes. This was a 5-alarm, all hands on deck, someone please take the microphone away situation. This was watching someone parallel park into a fire hydrant in slow motion while you're standing on the sidewalk going, no, 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 turn the wheel, and they just keep going. Because here's the thing, you can't walk this back, you can't unsay underwear drawer, you can't issue a clarifying statement that makes this better. What are you going to do? Put out a press release that says the president's comments about intimate apparel storage were taken out of context. There's no context that makes this okay at an affordability rally. There's no universe where this was the right call. And I'm trying to imagine the speechwriter, some poor staffer who probably went to a good school, worked on campaigns, thought they were going to help shape policy messaging. They wrote a speech about inflation. They put in statistics about wage growth and cost of living. They probably had a whole section about bringing down prescription drug prices. And they're standing backstage watching their boss talk about his wife's underwear for 5 minutes. And they're just quietly updating their LinkedIn profile, seeking new opportunities, proficient in Microsoft Word and emotional resilience. But you know what the worst part is? And I'm going to be serious for a second here, because this actually matters. There are real people out there who are struggling. I'm not talking about millionaires or people with 3 houses. I'm talking about families who are trying to figure out how to pay for groceries and rent in the same month. People who are working 2 jobs and still can't get ahead. Parents who are lying awake at night doing math in their heads, trying to figure out if they can afford their kids' field trip or if they need to save that $30 for the electric bill. Those people showed up in North Carolina hoping to hear something that might help them. They wanted answers. They wanted a plan. They wanted someone to acknowledge that life is really hard right now for a lot of people. And here's what we're going to do about it. And instead, they got 90 minutes of rambling, a significant portion of which was about closet organization and how the FBI doesn't understand the importance of proper folding techniques. That's not funny. That's just sad. But also, underwear drawer. Come on. Look, I get that Trump has grievances about the Mar-a-Lago search. I understand that he feels it was unjust. Fine. He's entitled to his opinion. But there's a time and a place, and an affordability rally in North Carolina is neither the time nor the place to workshop your material about federal agents and intimate apparel. Read the room. Actually, read the banner behind you that probably says something about making America affordable again, or whatever the slogan is this week. And the perfectly folded detail is what really gets me, because that's not a detail you include unless you've really thought about it. That's not a throwaway line. That's a specific observation, which means at some point, maybe right after the raid, maybe weeks later, maybe the night before this speech, Trump was thinking about the folding. He was dwelling on it. He was probably standing in that closet going, look at this. Look at how neat this was. And they just went through it like animals. Meanwhile, the rest of us are thinking about how we're going to afford to replace our water heater when it inevitably dies, because everything in your house decides to break at the same time. Like they're all in a group chat coordinating against you. But sure, let's talk about folding. I'm also fascinated by the fact that he described Melania as very meticulous, which, okay, fine, I'm sure she is. But that's such a weird detail to share in this context. It's like if I gave a speech about climate change and spent 10 minutes talking about how my wife organizes the recycling bins. She's very particular about which plastics go where. The FBI wouldn't understand. They'd probably put a yogurt container in with the cardboard. Disgusting. Nobody needs that information. Nobody wants that information. And yet, here we are. The other thing Trump mentioned, and this got less attention, but it's worth noting, is that FBI agents also went into his son's room. And look, I get it. If federal agents search your house, it's invasive, it's uncomfortable. Nobody wants that. But again, wrong speech. This was supposed to be about making life more affordable for working families, and instead it turned into a greatest hits compilation of personal grievances. It's like going to a parent-teacher conference and spending the whole time talking about your own childhood. Yeah, little Timmy's math grades, we'll get to that. But first, let me tell you about my 4th grade teacher who gave me a B- I didn't deserve. And the thing is, Trump's team had to know this was a risk. They've been through enough rallies at this point. They know he goes off script. They know he has topics he likes to return to, like a dog with a favorite tennis ball. The Mar-a-Lago raid is one of those topics. So someone, probably multiple someones, had to have said, okay, this is an economic speech. Let's stay focused. Let's talk about jobs and wages and maybe throw in something about tariffs if we're feeling spicy. Let's not talk about the FBI or classified documents or anyone's personal belongings. And Trump probably nodded and said, sure, affordability, got it, and then got on stage and immediately started talking about underwear drawers, because that's what he does, that's his thing. You can't stop it. You can only hope to contain it. At this point, his advisors are probably just playing defense. They're not trying to craft a coherent message anymore. They're just trying to minimize the damage. They're like those people at the airport who have to clean up after a bird flies into the terminal. You're not solving the problem. You're just making sure it doesn't get worse. Okay, he talked about underwear for 5 minutes. Could have been worse. Could have been 10 minutes. Could have been a PowerPoint presentation with diagrams. We'll take the win. But it wasn't a win. It was a 90-minute speech that was supposed to be about affordability and ended up being about closet organization. And now, instead of talking about Trump's economic policy, whatever that is, we're all talking about whether Melania uses the KonMari method or just has really good drawer dividers. Instead of debating tax rates or infrastructure spending, we're wondering if the FBI has a protocol for handling delicate fabrics during a search warrant execution. This is where we are. This is the discourse. A former president went to North Carolina, stood in front of a crowd of people who are worried about money, and spent part of his speech describing his wife's underwear drawer in detail. And somewhere, a campaign advisor is drinking directly from a bottle of wine at 11 in the morning, staring at their phone, watching the clip go viral, and thinking, I could have been a lawyer. I could have gone to law school. I could be doing estate planning in a nice quiet office somewhere, but no, I'm here, managing underwear drawer messaging. You know what's really wild? At least the Costco hot tub makes sense in July. You can justify that purchase. It's hot out. The kids would love it. It's basically a pool, but cheaper. There's a logic to it, even if your wife doesn't agree. But there's no logic to spending part of an affordability speech talking about how FBI agents don't appreciate good folding. There's no through line. There's no message discipline. It's just chaos. It's just a guy at a podium saying whatever comes into his head, and everyone around him has to pretend it's normal. And the perfectly folded thing, I keep coming back to that because it's such a specific detail. It's the kind of thing you'd mention to your spouse in private. Can you believe they went through your drawers? You had everything so nice. That's a reasonable thing to say at home. It's not a reasonable thing to say at a political rally. But Trump doesn't seem to recognize that distinction. To him, it's all the same. The personal is political. The political is personal. And the audience in North Carolina is just along for the ride, hoping that at some point he'll say something about grocery prices. Maybe he did. Maybe buried somewhere in those 90 minutes, there was a coherent point about inflation or wages or tax policy. But that's not what anyone's talking about. That's not what went viral. What went viral was the underwear drawer. What people remember is perfectly folded. And that's the problem. You can have the best economic policy in the world, but if you spend 5 minutes talking about your wife's closet organization, that's the headline. That's the story. That's what people are going to remember. I almost feel bad for the people who showed up expecting a normal speech. They probably told their friends, yeah, I'm going to the rally, should be interesting. He's talking about the economy. And now they have to go back to those friends and explain what actually happened. So, did you hear anything good about inflation? Not exactly. But I learned a lot about FBI search procedures and intimate apparel storage. What? Yeah, it was a whole thing. You kind of had to be there. Actually, no, you're lucky you weren't there. Lucky you. And look, I'm not saying Trump can't talk about the Mar-a-Lago raid. He can talk about whatever he wants. It's his rally. But maybe, and I'm just spitballing here, maybe save the personal grievances for a different event. Maybe have a separate rally called Things I'm Mad About, and just let it all out there. Talk about the FBI, talk about the media, talk about whoever else you think has wronged you. Get it all out of your system. And then, when you do the affordability rally, you can actually talk about affordability. Crazy idea, I know, but that's not going to happen. Because this is who Trump is. This is what he does. He doesn't stay on message. He doesn't stick to the script. He says whatever he's thinking in the moment, and sometimes that's about trade policy, and sometimes it's about his wife's underwear drawer, and his team just has to deal with it. They're not driving the car. They're just passengers hoping he doesn't drive into a lake. And the voters, the people who actually need help, who are struggling to make ends meet, they're stuck in the middle. They show up hoping for answers and they get anecdotes. They want policy and they get grievances. They need someone to take their problems seriously, and instead they get a 90-minute stream of consciousness performance that includes a detailed description of closet organization. That's the real story here. Not the underwear drawer itself, though that's certainly memorable, but the fact that a speech about affordability turned into something completely different, and nobody seems surprised anymore. We've all just accepted that this is how it goes. Trump gives a speech. It goes off the rails, everyone talks about the weird part, and then we move on to the next one. It's like a TV show that jumped the shark 5 seasons ago, but somehow keeps getting renewed. Next rally, maybe someone should just hand him a stack of note cards with inflation written on them in Sharpie, big letters, nothing else. Just inflation on every card. And maybe that'll keep him focused for more than 10 minutes before he starts talking about something completely unrelated. Or maybe it won't. Maybe he'll look at those cards and somehow find a way to connect inflation to the time someone didn't fold his towels correctly in 1987. At this point, anything's possible. Or don't give him the cards, because honestly, this is content gold. I mean, it's terrible for the people who need actual economic policy, but for those of us who have to talk about this stuff every night, it's a gift. You can't write this, you can't make this up. A former president talking about his wife's perfectly folded underwear at an affordability rally. That's real, that happened. We all watched it happen. Anyway, we'll see.